Namaskar, this is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. It's Monday evening in India. The big story comes from the neighborhood. The Maldivian president who came to power on the India Out platform may be out himself. Mohamed Muizzu faces the prospect of impeachment. The opposition has the numbers. Their parliament saw complete chaos yesterday with lawmakers kicking and punching each other. We'll bring you the pictures and the politics. In West Asia, a major escalation that may force the US to join the war. American troops have been killed in a drone attack in Jordan by Iran-backed militias. Meanwhile, the Iranian foreign minister was in Pakistan today to mend ties after both sides fired missiles at each other. In China, property giant Evergrande is over. A Hong Kong court has ordered its liquidation. The company has $300 billion in debt. Why is Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni making an outreach to Africa? Why Taylor Swift's deepfake has drawn sharp reactions, including from the US president? What does a new defense scam mean for Ukraine that is struggling to get foreign aid? Why are protesters attacking famous art to make their point? Why tourists at Machu Picchu are stranded? And this may not sound like Monday motivation, but would you attend your own funeral? We'll discuss the headlines first. North Korea continues its missile launching spree, tests submarine-launched cruise missiles. This is the second test of the weapon within a week. In recent months, Pyongyang has accelerated its weapons testing. This includes an underwater drone and a hypersonic ballistic missile. Russia's Vladimir Putin formally registers as presidential candidate. He is all but certain to win the election due in March. Since 1999, Putin has been in power either as president or prime minister thanks to a controversial constitutional reform. 71-year-old Putin could stay in power till 2036. Burkina Faso, Mali and Niger quit the West African bloc of ECOWAS. The military is in power in all these three nations. They accuse the bloc of working under foreign influence and called it a threat to the members. All three countries are founding members of ECOWAS, which was formed in 1975. Myanmar attends an ASEAN meet for the first time in more than 2 years. Since October 2021, the 10-member bloc had banned the junta from its summits. The generals also refused to send non-political representatives. ASEAN's efforts to resolve the crisis in Myanmar has had little success. In India, big jolt to Farooq Abdullah's national conference. On Sunday, several top leaders of his party joined the BJP in Jammu. The setback comes just months before the general election. Yesterday, Bihar Chief Minister Nitish Kumar also dumped the opposition to return to the ruling NDA. Days before India's union budget, focus on sports with the Paris Olympics just months away. In 2023, the sports sector got the highest ever budget allocation in its history. And the UK unveils a plan to ban disposable e-cigarettes. The move comes amid a sharp rise in youth vaping. Last year, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak pledged to make England a smoke-free nation by 2030. What do you think you just saw? Option 1, mixed martial arts. Option 2, world wrestling entertainment. Option 3, the Maldivian Parliament. Well, that's what it was. The Parliament, also known as the People's Majlis. And the men you saw in suits and ties were lawmakers beating, kicking and pushing each other. It was quite a blockbuster. It premiered on Sunday in Malé and the protagonist is this man, President Mohamed Muizzu. He took office 3 months back and now he faces the threat of impeachment. The opposition is up in arms. They're blocking his appointments and holding him to account. And this is quite a dramatic turn of events because until a few days ago, Muizzu seemed to be in total control. He was issuing ultimatums. He was picking fights with neighbors like India. But it seems he overplayed his hand, tried to ride roughshod over the parliament, and now they're testing his authority and his grip on power. Tonight, we'll tell you how this came about. First things first, what triggered the brawl? A vote. It was to be held on Sunday, and this was not a regular session. The lawmakers were called for a special vote to approve Muizzu's cabinet. When he came to power, the president picked his team, the cabinet. But according to the constitution of the Maldives, the parliament must sign off on this cabinet. That is the law. In his capacity as president, Muizzu can fill only one position, that of vice president. For the cabinet positions, he must convince the parliament. He must get a nod from them. And this was always going to be a problem because Muizzu's party is in minority. His party plus his allies are in minority. In the parliament in Mali, the opposition is in majority. So for President Muizzu to have his team in place, he needs support from the opposition. It was clear from day one. He should have known this. He should have tried to work with opposition leaders, but he did not. Instead of seeking support, he tried to push them around. He attempted to use force to get his appointments through. And this backfired. The president proposed 22 names. The opposition cleared 18 positions. They blocked the remaining 4. Ahmad Usham, the Attorney General, Mohammad Saeed, the Economy Minister, Dr. Ali Haider, the Housing Minister, and Dr. Mohammad Shahim Ali Saeed, the Islamic Minister. These were the names that have been blocked. The opposition issued a whip against them. The Muizzu camp was furious. They abused the opposition. One thing led to another, and the result was this brawl. Reports say the Muizzu camp instigated this. They locked the chamber doors. They blocked opposition members from entering the house. And when they still did not have their way, they started protesting and obstructing the proceedings. Some lawmakers reached the speaker's chair. These were supporters of the president. They tried to stop the speaker from addressing the parliament. What followed was fist fights. Lawmakers punched, pushed, and kicked each other. Complete pandemonium. At least 2 lawmakers were hurt in this. And all of this happened yesterday. Then earlier today, the parliament met again. The MPs finally got a chance to vote. Remember, yesterday's proceedings were disrupted, so they had to vote today. There was some relief for the president this time. One of the blocked names was cleared. Economy Minister Mohammad Saeed. His name has been cleared now. The other 3 have been rejected. So the impasse continues. What's worse, the president could now face an impeachment vote. The opposition is preparing a motion. They're gathering signatures. They already have the support of 34 members, they say, which is enough to bring the motion to the floor. And here's how the numbers stack up. The House has a total of 80 members, 80. The ruling coalition has 19 seats. The opposition claims that it has the support of 56 members. The rest are said to be undecided. And how many votes do you need to impeach the president? At least 2/3 of the House, so at least 54, meaning the opposition has the numbers and the president is on thin ice. His supporters have submitted a motion of their own. It targets the Speaker and the Deputy Speaker. Both belong to the opposition. So the stage is basically set for a major showdown in the Maldives. Less than 3 months into office, President Muizzu is struggling to save his chair. Meanwhile, in West Asia, tension continues to escalate, so much so that now the US may be drawn directly into this war. So far, they were operating on the sidelines, but now they've suffered a direct attack. It happened on Sunday night at a US military base called Tower 22. It's in Jordan. Tower 22 was attacked. 3 American soldiers were killed. At least 34 were injured. It was a drone attack launched by a group that calls itself the Islamic Resistance in Iraq. This is the group that has taken credit for the strike. It's a group of militias that operate in Iraq and Syria, and they're backed by Iran. This Iran-backed group has been on the war path for months, since the October 7th attack by Hamas. They've attacked the US multiple times. Reports say over 160 times. And finally, this weekend, they broke through the American defenses. It's a massive escalation. 3 US troops killed by direct hostile action. It's a first since the Israel-Hamas war began, and this may force the Americans into action.
I want to point out that we had a tough day last night in the Middle East. We lost 3 brave souls in an attack on one of our bases.
Yes.
And I'd ask you for a moment of silence for all 3 of those fallen soldiers.
Jesus.
And we shall respond. God bless you all. Thank you for allowing me to be here.
Biden said that the US shall respond. He also released a statement. The last line is clearly a threat. It says, "We will hold all those responsible to account at a time and in a manner of our choosing." This has sent alarm bells ringing in West Asia, especially in Iran, the country Washington blames for the deaths. Here is how Iran responded.
Resistance groups in the region do not take orders from the Islamic Republic of Iran in their decisions and actions. Repeating baseless accusations against Iran is the projection and conspiracy of those who see their interests in dragging America's feet into a new battle in the region and inciting it in the expansion and escalation of the crisis to cover up their problems.
So Tehran is distancing itself from the attacks. It says it did not give orders to the militias, that they acted on their own. But the US is not buying it. Look at Biden's statement again. He said the attack was carried out by radical Iran-backed militant groups. He made sure to mention Iran. So did Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin in a separate statement. So they are not being shy about naming Iran, and American politicians are even less restrained. Republican Party Senator Lindsey Graham has called for, and I'm quoting, "striking targets of significance inside Iran." Republican Senator Mitch McConnell wants Biden to, and I'm quoting again, "exercise American strength to compel Iran to change its behavior." Even Democrats are not holding back. Congressman Hakeem Jeffries says every single malignant actor responsible must be held accountable. So Biden may not have a choice, really. 3 soldiers have died. This is an election year. Joe Biden cannot afford to look soft, which means there is a chance that the US would escalate. So far, it has limited itself to airstrikes in Iraq and Syria and missile attacks on the Yemen-based Houthi group. Washington was working on the principle of deterrence, but that has clearly failed. They could not deter the Iraq-based militias from attacking. So now the boots on the ground may come into play. And the Americans do have some. They have about 900 troops in Syria, 2,500 in Iraq, and 4,000 in Jordan. They had been placed there to combat a different threat, to fight the ISIS. The US has been leading a coalition to take down the terror group ISIS in this region, but these troops could now be redirected and they may be used against the Islamic resistance in Iraq instead, or perhaps even against their backers in Iran. That risks another all-out war in West Asia, something that the US and Iran have both been trying to avoid. And Iran's message proves this. So do America's actions so far. But this attack may have changed the scenario. We'll keep you updated as the story develops. From Iran's western front, we go to the east, that is Pakistan. It is hosting the Iranian foreign minister today, Hossein Amir Abdullah Hayyan. He landed in Islamabad today. He was invited by his Pakistani counterpart. The two leaders held a bilateral. They emphasized on regional security, border relations, and trade. All of it sounds like regular stuff. Wouldn't even have made it to the headlines had it not been for what happened 2 weeks ago. Iran attacked Pakistan and Pakistan attacked right back. Since then, relations have been strained. Let me give you a quick rewind. Earlier this month, Tehran launched missiles into Pakistan. They targeted a militant group in the Balochistan province. And what did Pakistan do? First, they fired back diplomatically. Then they used their military. Islamabad struck Baloch separatists inside Iran. So within 48 hours, the score was 1-1. The strikes left at least 11 civilians dead on both sides, including children. They reignited tensions. But for 2 weeks, no formal meetings were held. Then today, Iran's foreign minister met his counterpart and he blamed third countries for the tensions. This is what he said. Terrorists are located in the common border areas of Iran and Pakistan, and they're led and supported by third countries. Now, that's a bold statement to make. A, because Iran is accepting that there are terrorists on its soil, and B, it is blaming an unnamed third country for it. What's more, Pakistan has not objected to this. Instead, they're calling the visit a diplomatic win for both sides.
His visit at such a short notice testifies to deep commitment of both sides to further strengthen and solidify the fraternal ties between Pakistan and Iran. It's a relationship which is steeped in shared religion, history, culture, and geography. And this is a relationship which is also underpinned by strong bonds of amity and brotherhood.
So why is the Iranian minister in Pakistan? Was it the military strikes? Was it the downgrading of diplomatic ties? Perhaps a bit of both and more. The visit comes 2 days after a particular attack. 9 Pakistani nationals were killed in Iran. 3 people are being treated for wounds. The attack took place in Iran's Sistan and Balochistan province, in a town called Saravan. It is only a few hundred kilometers from Pakistan. The attack was carried out by unidentified gunmen. No group has claimed responsibility. Iranian media did not even identify the deceased as Pakistani nationals. But their families are mourning, and they're demanding answers.
Our relatives worked as laborers and have been living in Iran's city of Saravan for the last 8 or 10 years. My other nephew, who was injured in the firing, told me on the phone that around 3 or 3:30 a.m., 3 terrorists came and asked them to get up and wanted to know who among them were Pakistanis. They opened fire and killed 9 of them.
The Iranian minister's visit comes right after this. The death of the 9 Pakistani civilians was discussed in this visit. Pakistan has called the killings horrifying. They have demanded an investigation. Iran says it will cooperate, and both sides ended the matter by agreeing to combat terror.
We recognized that close relationship between Pakistan and Iran are not only imperative for shared prosperity and development of our two peoples, but also an important source of stability for the region. Guided by this spirit, Pakistan and Iran have resolved to expand our cooperation, especially in the political and security domains.
You heard them. They say they want to normalize ties. The talks were followed by laughs and hugs. Islamabad has even officially invited Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi. The visit is scheduled for next month. The death of civilians has been swept under the rug. Iran and Pakistan are back in business. Our next story is from China. Its property crisis is unraveling. Its property market is unraveling. One of the biggest developers is going under. Evergrande is over. The court has ordered it for the company to be liquidated, meaning Evergrande will be broken up and sold for parts. Now, Evergrande defaulted in 2021. It owes some $300 billion in debt. And for 18 months, there was constant back and forth. They were under a lot of pressure from creditors and from courts. In June 2022, one of their investors filed a lawsuit in Hong Kong. It put the company on notice. Evergrande was asked to get its affairs in order, come up with a plan, and restructure its debt. And since then, at every hearing, it was the same story. Evergrande would ask for more time. And the court in Hong Kong was patient. It gave 7 extensions in all, but today the court ran out of patience. You must hear what the judge said, and I'm quoting, "It is time for the court to say, enough is enough." And that's when the judge gave the orders. Evergrande was asked to liquidate. So what happens next? The directors will lose control of Evergrande. The court will appoint an official, better known as a liquidator. This could be a government employee or someone from a professional firm. Now, their job will be to meet the creditors, negotiate with them, and take over the management of the company. The process could take several months, even years.
So it's quite likely that Evergrande will be broken down into a much smaller company if it still survives in the future. So, or maybe it's not the end of the world for the macroeconomy, but I still think on the corporate level, it can be quite painful.
The process is going to be painful. There's a jurisdiction issue as well. Hong Kong versus mainland China. Essentially, the question is this: will the order from the Hong Kong court apply to mainland China as well? It's not clear as of now. The legal systems are different. Plus, the track record is a mixed bag. Sometimes a verdict from Hong Kong is enforced on the mainland. Sometimes it's not. There are agreements which can be used to enforce this verdict, but they're used selectively. So the situation is murky right now, and Evergrande may be looking to exploit this grey area. The company's executive has spoken. Executive director, his name is Sean Siu. He says Evergrande's business in Hong Kong is separate from the mainland, so the impact will be limited. And that's the spin that Evergrande is giving to this verdict. They have the option to appeal too. So the court battle may continue. Evergrande may fight this order tooth and nail, but it is losing the perception battle. Today, their stock fell sharply. It lost 20% of its value after a point the trading of Evergrande shares was suspended.
After the company was able to sort its finances itself for about a year and a half, a court has now decided its liquidation, and that obviously rings alarm bells with capital markets around the world. In theory, the impact could be huge because the company's debt load is very, very large, and because it has a worldwide network.
The creditors are an anxious lot. Out of the 300 billion that Evergrande owes, just 25 billion is from overseas. So most creditors are in China, and there is no resolution in sight for them. Their money is stuck, if not completely lost. Same with the home buyers. And there are way too many of them. In September 2021, the figure was 1.5 million. And these were the people waiting for their homes. Meaning 1.5 million customers of Evergrande still haven't got their homes. They invested in housing projects, in most cases by borrowing money. And they still haven't got an apartment. It's going to be a long wait for them if they get a house at all. What's worse, Evergrande is just one case. China is dealing with an avalanche of failing property developers. In the last 3 years, more than 50 developers have either missed payments or defaulted on their debt. And this list could get bigger. Chinese developers face more deadlines this year. In 2024 alone, they have to repay some $100 billion. And let me repeat, this is the money that they have to repay. So the writing is on the wall for both creditors and investors. The creditors should be prepared to write off some loans because more defaults seem inevitable. As for the investors, Evergrande should be a cautionary tale. Because when the going gets tough, the Chinese government bails. They seem to be doing the same now. There is no assurance of a rescue from Beijing, none. And without any financial guarantees from the government, what options do investors have but to exercise caution, pull their money and distance themselves from China's unstable economy? To Italy now, where Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni is faced with two challenges: stopping illegal immigration and ensuring a steady supply of energy. And she has zeroed in on one candidate that can potentially solve both: Africa. Prime Minister Meloni wants to work with African nations. She's hosting a summit in Rome, an Italy-Africa summit, to get them on board. She insists that her approach is quote-unquote non-predatory and that it will be a win-win for both sides. But when it comes to Europe and their fraught history, Africa would do well to be wary. Our next report explains.
Leaders from about 25 African nations descended upon Rome today. There were officials from the United Nations and European Union as well, as were representatives from the World Bank. All these delegates went to Italy's historic Senate building to discuss an ambitious new plan, a scheme Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni has dubbed the Mattei Plan. Named after Enrico Mattei, the founder of Italy's state-owned energy company, Eni.
Our future inevitably depends on the future of the African continent. That's why we have decided to launch an ambitious program of interventions that is capable of helping the continent grow and prosper starting from its immense resources. All this is the backbone of the Italian strategic project that we call the Machu Plan for Africa.
Italy is planning to invest in Africa, starting with North Africa and what she called the Sub-Saharan Quadrant. What is she planning to invest in? The name of the plan should give you a hint.
We have always been convinced that Italy has all it takes to become the natural energy supply hub for the whole of Europe.
Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022 exposed a European weakness, its dependence on Russian oil and gas. Most European countries struggled to end this dependence when the war began. Rising energy costs led to a cost of living crisis and a scramble for alternate energy sources. But that episode seems to have given Meloni an idea: to turn to Africa to secure Europe's energy supplies. Meloni hasn't specified what type of energy, but it's known that fossil fuels are readily found in Africa. So it's ironic where her Machu Plan's funding is coming from. About $3.3 billion will be allocated by the Italian Climate Fund, out of a total of around $6 billion allocated under the Machu Plan. All of this money isn't just for energy projects. Some will apparently be earmarked for education, training, health, agriculture and water as well. But these funds come at a price. Meloni became Prime Minister by promising to reduce illegal migration. She plans to use her new Machu Plan to augment its push.
Human traffickers will never be defeated if the causes that push a person to leave his home are not addressed at the source. This is exactly what we intend to do, from one side by declaring war to the smugglers of the third millennium, and on the other by working to offer African people an alternative of opportunities, work, training and legal migration paths.
Italy already trains the Coast Guard in Tunisia and Libya. They are trained to stop migrants from crossing the Mediterranean in boats. Meloni wants to expand her African anti-migration tactics. She reportedly wants to sign readmittance deals with origin countries, so she's able to send illegal migrants back to their home nations. The energy investments seem to be an incentive for the countries of origin of the migrants. This is the crux of Meloni's Machu Plan. She calls it non-predatory, non-paternalistic, but also not charitable. It's a business deal which helps her deal with both illegal migration and energy insecurity. But is her offer good enough? Will the African nations be willing to accept her relatively small investment? After all, the EU has already promised a much larger investment. The EU unveiled a $160 billion package in 2022. So Meloni's $6 billion seems quite underwhelming. The Italy-Africa summit concludes tomorrow. We'll see how many nations Meloni can win over by then.
Now let's talk about a new crisis that we're hopelessly ill-equipped to deal with: deep fakes and their unauthorized use. Last week, singer Taylor Swift became a victim. Someone created and spread explicit images depicting her. Social media platforms were flooded. One image of Taylor Swift was viewed 45 million times before it was taken down. Taylor Swift has not spoken about this, but reports say her team is considering legal action. From politicians to tech executives, there is widespread outrage. Even the US president has spoken about this. But the question is, what are they willing to do to fix it? Is there political will to stop the menace of deepfakes? Here's a report.
Deepfakes are becoming more rampant. Some can be easily spotted. Look at this video. It's from an old speech, but with a clearly fake twist. Donald Trump's face has been replaced with Narendra Modi's. The movement of the face and the noticeable difference in the complexion give it away. But some deepfakes are harder to catch, like this one. It features India's opposition leader Rahul Gandhi dressed as a porter and branded with the number 420. In Indian culture, this number carries a negative connotation. It's used to describe someone as a cheat. This is the real image. When you zoom in, the badge number is not 420, it's 756. The changes are barely noticeable and even more harder to identify with the naked eye. Every day, the menace of deepfakes takes a new victim. Last week, singer Taylor Swift was targeted. Sexually explicit AI images of Swift were circulated. One such post on X was up for 17 hours. It was viewed over 45 million times and reshared 24,000 times, with tens of thousands of users liking the post. The engagement supercharged the fake picture. By the time the moderators woke up, it was too late. Hundreds of accounts began reposting Taylor Swift's deepfake. The image started an online trend, Taylor Swift AI, reaching an even larger audience. The source of the photograph wasn't even X to begin with. It came from a Telegram group where users share explicit pictures. Apparently, they are made using tools from Microsoft. The revelations are causing outrage. American lawmakers from across party lines have spoken. One of them says they were astounded. Another said they were hardly shocked and called on Swift's fan base for help. The sharpest reaction came from the White House.
We are alarmed by the reports of the circulation of images that you just laid out, false images to be more exact, and it is alarming. Our commitment and that we will continue to do and continue to take action and make sure that we continue to work on this. And again, this is very alarming, and so we're going to do what we can to deal with this issue.
It is alarming indeed, and it continues to get worse. Experts say deepfake pornography is rampant. There are over 9,500 websites devoted to non-consensual intimate imagery. Over 96% of deepfake videos online are of deepfake pornography, and they exclusively target women. The crisis is real, and it's getting bigger by the day. Since 2019, there has been a 550% rise in the production of doctored images. No prizes for guessing, this surge is fueled by the rise of AI. The world is facing a tsunami of deepfakes, and with no protective measures in place, this threat will only get worse, affecting our politics, our celebrities, and the very fabric of our society.
Now let's look at a more conventional scandal, a defense procurement scam. Ukraine has unearthed a $40 million scam. It involves an order for artillery shells. 100,000 were bought and paid for, but they were never delivered. 100,000 shells. The scam took place in August 2022, 6 months after the Russia-Ukraine war began. Kiev was in desperate need of arms and ammunition. You may remember the desperation. President Volodymyr Zelensky begging for foreign aid. But while he was doing that, his own officials were embezzling money. The scam was uncovered by Ukraine's security service, the SBU. They conducted raids on Saturday. They say they have arrested 5 people. 2 of them were senior officials from the Ministry of Defense. Here's how the scam unfolded. The Ukrainian officials worked with the CEO of an arms company, a company called Lviv Arsenal. This firm got a contract for 100,000 mortar shells. It was worth about $40 million. This money was taken from the state coffers. It was given to the firm up front, but then a large chunk was transferred offshore to a bank account in the Balkans. The mortar shells were never delivered to Ukraine's military, making it a case of outright robbery. And remember, this took place in August 2022. It has taken Ukraine more than a year to arrest the people involved, and it comes at a time when the country is desperately in need of weapons. The security service released these pictures of the arrests, but it won't do much to protect Ukraine's reputation. Neither will Zelensky's latest stunt. He has publicly declared his income. He's pushing for a transparency drive, trying to convince his officials to release their own income reports. He hopes this will bring back public confidence, show the people that he is cracking down on corruption, and show his allies that he can be trusted. Because that is critical for him right now. Ukraine is completely dependent on foreign aid. It has already received billions in financial, humanitarian, and military aid. We have some numbers. Over 80 billion from European institutions, 80 billion from EU institutions, and about $75 billion from the US. In fact, America is the largest supplier of direct military aid to Ukraine. It has sent Kiev weapons and military supplies worth more than $46 billion. This is part of the 75. Just last month, the US announced assistance worth another $250 million, but this aid may dry up. US President Joe Biden is having a tough time keeping the pipeline open. Every new request to the Congress is met with added scrutiny, which is why Ukraine needs to clean up its act. There hasn't been much progress on the front lines. Ukraine's much-wanted counter-offensive failed last year. The war seems to have come to a standstill. So more aid already looks like a waste of time and money. In this situation, corruption is the last straw, really. Ukraine's allies will feel they're lining pockets instead of helping the country. And this will cause the funding to dry up further. Zelensky has been trying to change perceptions. Last September, he sacked his defense minister, Oleksiy Reznikov. The minister was not personally implicated in any crime, but a number of defense scams took place under his stewardship, so the minister was removed. It was a face-saving stunt. Today you have Zelensky's papers and footage from a raid. But that won't be enough to motivate the soldiers on the front lines or placate Ukraine's allies. Zelensky needs to do more to clean up Ukraine's image, or the foreign funding will end and his country will be up a creek without mortars. Have you heard of the Mona Lisa? There's a good chance you have. It's one of the most famous paintings in the world. It was made in the 16th century by Leonardo da Vinci, But being famous comes with its downsides. On Sunday, 2 protesters hurled soup at the painting. It is glass protected, so the aim was not to harm the painting, but to draw attention. The protesters threw soup while calling for the right to healthy food. And yes, the irony is not lost on us. But this is not the first time such a protest has happened. And Mona Lisa is not the only target. This is a new tactic for protesters. They're throwing food and paint at famous art, trying to bring attention to the cause. But the question remains, is this a productive form of protest? Or does it distract from the cause? Our next report explores.
What is more important, art or the right to healthy and sustainable food? It is a big question, and that's what 2 protesters asked after they hurled soup at a painting. Ironic, isn't it? It may even have been slightly comic. Instead, it was a big, ugly mess, because that painting drenched in soup is the Mona Lisa. Yes, the world-famous painting. It was created in the 16th century by Leonardo da Vinci. You can view it at the Louvre in Paris, where it is behind protective glass. So when the protesters threw soup at it, the painting was not damaged. But that was not the aim anyway. The protesters simply wanted to make a statement, and that they did. But people weren't happy. French Culture Minister Rachida Dati condemned the protest. She said, "The Mona Lisa, like our heritage, belongs to future generations. No cause can justify it being targeted." Some museum visitors were angry.
It's disgusting to treat art that's really valuable for the history of humankind that way.
But most of all, people were confused.
Yes, I understand the demands 1,000 times. But on the other hand, when it comes to the link with art, I don't see why they target works of art. I really don't see the link. I'm not shocked for the Mona Lisa, I'm not worried for her because she's ultra protected. But then I don't see the link with food other than the fact that the Mona Lisa is internationally recognized, so we will definitely hear about this event. But other than that, I don't see any connection.
Indeed, it can be confusing, especially as such protests have become more common than ever. The cause may be climate change or sustainable food, but art has become the common target of varied protests. People are throwing paint and food on art. The world's most famous works, mind you. Last year, Van Gogh's sunflowers turned to the darker palette of tomato soup. Monet's grain stacks went from grains to potatoes. and the Mona Lisa, a crowd favorite for protests, attended an unwanted cake tasting. Activists say these protests are meant to draw attention, to demand action and address concerns, like the impending effects of climate change, the abuse of fossil fuels, or the lack of a healthy diet reaching all tiers of society. While the causes they fight for may be good, the strategy is faulty. Even if the actual painting is not harmed, the property is. Sometimes protesters spray paint gallery walls, glue themselves to it. Meanwhile, some protesters are taking matters even further, like zip-locking themselves to goalposts or blocking motorways. It is disruptive, and no matter how good the soup, it leaves people with a bad taste. Because property damage is no substitute for argument, and causing outrage is not the same as advocacy. So like any work of art, the beauty of protests may lie in the eye of the beholder. But so far, most people only see food strewn across beloved paintings.
Our next story is about one of the 7 wonders of the world. Do you know about Machu Picchu? It's an ancient citadel nestled in the peaks of Peru. Ruins of the Inca Empire from the 15th century. There are a number of ways to visit it. You can trek or take a train. Until now, the only way to get a ticket was through the Peruvian Ministry of Culture, but now the government wants to privatize ticket sales. Tour operators and locals are up in arms. They want the culture minister to resign. Local markets and train services have been shut down. Hundreds of tourists are being forced to walk. Many are stranded. The World Heritage Site is facing a crisis. Here's our report on Machu Picchu.
If you've been bit by the travel bug, then some of these wonders of the world are definitely on your bucket list. The iconic Colosseum in Italy, the beautiful Taj Mahal in India, and the majestic Christ the Redeemer statue in Brazil. It takes months of planning, deliberations, and a lot of money to visit these. And yet, millions of people travel to these wonders every single year. But there's one marvel which has become a nightmare for tourists. Nestled deep in the high-altitude Andes Mountains in southern Peru are the ruins of a 15th century citadel. It's called Machu Picchu, and it's one of the biggest tourist attractions in the world. There are multiple ways of reaching Machu Picchu. You can trek from the old city of Cusco to the top, but that will take you a few days. You can also take the train. That will cut down your journey to only a few hours. Taking the train is preferred by a majority of the tourists. Except there's been a snag. More and more people are being forced to trek the treacherous slopes. It's not because they prefer the hike. It's because the train services have been brought to a standstill. The locals of Machu Picchu are not happy with the government. They have vowed to go on an indefinite strike, and this is affecting tourism. Traveling to Machu Picchu requires tickets. These can be purchased from the Peruvian Cultural Ministry's website. Now the government wants to privatize that. They have entered an agreement with a firm called Join Us. Tour operators and local residents of Machu Picchu are not happy with this. They are afraid that their businesses and livelihoods will be impacted, and the protesters claim that the national heritage will become privatized.
All the people of Machu Picchu are protesting here near Machu Picchu to tell the Peruvian state to stop the privatization policies. We believe that outsourcing virtual ticket sales for Machu Picchu is one more step towards privatizing not only Machu Picchu, but also the main archaeological sites in the country.
There have been clashes between the demonstrators and the police. Local restaurants and markets have been shut down. Train tracks remain blocked. Hundreds of visitors are being forced to trek. Many are stranded on the steep slopes, and tourism is bearing the brunt. Worryingly, the rift between the locals and the central government is increasing. The locals are demanding the resignation of the culture minister, but the government has doubled down. They think privatization will formalize the local economy.
It is important to tell you that in no way there is an interest to privatize the monument. On the contrary, there is a genuine interest of the Peruvian state to take care of it, protect it, and that also entails the real verification of the people who enter the sanctuary. There is an annual discrepancy of at least 70,000 to 80,000 people who enter in excess of the capacity, violating what the Peruvian government has committed to before UNESCO.
Once a marvel of ancient masterpiece, Machu Picchu has now become a political battleground. The Inca Empire's ruins are the most visited attraction in Peru. The ongoing turmoil will only discourage travel, hurt the local economy more, and rob thousands of tourists of the beautiful sights of Machu Picchu.
For our last story tonight, I want you to picture a scene. There's a celebration. Your family and friends are present. They've gathered to celebrate your life. There is music and good food. There are people sharing heartfelt tributes, talking about what you mean to them. Some wish they'd told you this earlier. There are tears, there's laughter, and everything else in between. In case you haven't guessed it yet, I am describing a funeral. I know it's only Monday, but stay with me. Imagine all of this, a regular funeral with one crucial difference. You are present at your own funeral. Not as a ghost or a ghoul, mind you. You're attending the wake while actually being awake. This is an example of a living funeral, also known as a pre-funeral. It may sound morbid and bizarre, the idea is slightly bonkers, but on second thoughts, maybe it isn't such a bad thing. Holding a living funeral is a radical choice, and in some cases, it proves to be a great one. I'll tell you why. It offers people a chance to say goodbye to their families, close or long-lost friends, even foster cats or nemesis. Anything goes, because creative control lies with the person bidding goodbye. And they get to do so in their own terms, on their own terms. And with this, they don't just celebrate death, but also their life, all while they're still alive. Plus, people at the receiving end of the outpouring of love get to truly enjoy it. After all, who doesn't love attention? Now, Ross Geller from Friends may have done it first. He desperately needed attention to feel alive, so he faked his death, held a funeral. It was good comic relief. But according to experts and those who have held their own funerals, in most cases, living funerals can be uplifting, especially for people with terminal illness, like cancer or dementia, or simply those growing old. And while the concept may sound radical, it's not entirely new. Living funerals are fairly common in Japan, apparently. They're known as Shizenso, meaning funeral while living. They started gaining popularity in the late 1900s, but here they didn't just take off simply as a big party. They were held to take the pressure off family members. After all, coping with grief after the loss of a loved one is heavy enough without the stress and financial burden of organizing a funeral. And this practice is prevalent in South Korea too. It gained popularity in the 2010s, but here the reason behind living funerals is slightly different. In South Korea, both young and old put on burial shrouds. Then they lie down in the coffins and someone hammers the lid closed. Participants are left encased. They lie in utter darkness for minutes, which can feel like an eternity. Some participants want to prepare for the end. Others want to dispel suicidal impulses. But most of all, people want to face their mortality.
I can die regardless of my age. I think this is a good chance to prepare for my end in a calm way.
They could feel that it was meaningless, that they'd been holding things so tight. Now they can relax and find a way for a meaningful life.
In fact, in South Korea, living funerals are the new normal, apparently. Some businesses treat them as motivational programs. They sponsor employee participation. But most people do it on their own. In 2019, 25,000 people took part in a mass living funeral, 25,000 people. These images can be jarring. Understandably so. Death is a scary concept and a paradoxical one. It is a certainty of everyone's life. It is on everyone's mind at some point, yet it is taboo. Living funerals counter this approach. They help people make peace with the inevitable. They make sure nothing is left unsaid. They reaffirm what is important. Plus, if you're dying to hear the nice things that people have to say about you, and if you're ready to go to such extremes, maybe a living funeral will help. Honestly, I've thought about this story the whole day. I'm not sure. I've made up my mind on whether it's a good idea. We'd like to know what you think about this. Write to us. We're wrapping up the show. Time for Vantage shots, images that tell the story. India held the Beating Retreat ceremony today, marking the conclusion of the Republic Day celebrations. Beating Retreat is a display of military pageantry and a musical ritual steeped in tradition. Meanwhile, the world's largest cruise ship set sail on its maiden voyage from Miami, and a dog made a new friend while curing our Monday blues. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 2001, about 10,000 protesters marched through the streets of Jakarta, the capital of Indonesia. They stormed the parliament over corruption scandals of then president, making it one of the nation's biggest protests. We're leaving you with this. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Live from Vijay Chowk by Doordarshan and light bathed
व्यक्तियों का प्रस्थान आरोपूर्वक